Hi, my name is Mikayla Combs, and today's question is, are LGBTQ students accepted by their teachers and their peers? I chose this topic today due to this week's readings and how prevalent this topic is in today's society. I believe that students should be entitled to an equal education, yet remarks and bullying from peers due to sexual preferences or gender identity can put a damper in those students' education and motivation to come to school. I'm first just going to define LGBTQ, which basically just means the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning people. And it's just people who fall under this kind of big umbrella term that isn't even just these 5 things, but it's just people who don't identify with the same heterosexual identity that is considered the normal. The LGBTQ community has faced hardships, discrimination, and harassment for many years, and in the classroom, students do not always feel safe. There are still many states who do not approve of the discussions of LGBTQ issues, and that means that students just don't get to talk about the issues that are surrounding them. This topic is prevalent today because despite the recent achievements of the LGBT community, which is like having same-sex marriage and adoption for same-sex couples legalized, there is still hate and harassment that surrounds this community. In 2016, in Virginia, a transgender teen boy and his family had to sue the Horry County Board of Education for banning him from using the men's restroom. The appeals court had overturned the ban after protests had arose from the families of his classmates, and the school was forced to lift the ban. There are many factors that can be changed to be more inclusive towards the people in the LGBTQ community, especially in today's schools. Today I will discuss the overall acceptance and discrimination that these students face and how we can make students feel safe at school while disciplining the people who are causing the problem. Next, I'm just going to talk about the background of perspectives. I'm going to talk about the opposing views and also the allied views to the LGBTQ community. Many of these students, they feel harassed, bullied, and even isolated from their peers, and they don't always feel accepted by the school and even the teachers in their own classrooms. There's many states who have implemented laws to protect the rights and safety of these students, but it doesn't mean that their harassment stops. There are many people who disagree that same-sex couples should get married or be together at all, and there's even people who believe that you shouldn't discuss gender or even sexual identity with children because it's inappropriate or immoral. Even though a lot of these people disagree that we should talk about it, there's been a recent uprise in the inclusion of the LGBTQ curriculum. This curriculum changes, it's led to a greater sense of safety and less homophobia surrounding the students. Basically, it's students being able to learn about the lives and the hardships of the LGBTQ community, and even having gender identity children's books and other books for children to kind of start to understand at a very young age. Even just having co-ed sports teams or games in PE will make people feel like they're more included and they don't have to pick a side when they don't really know which one that they might be. Incorporating LGBTQ information into school textbooks, it allows for the understanding and acceptance of gender and sexuality differences. So definitely within the last few years, there's been a lot of acceptance from schools and peers towards the LGBTQ community. As of 2018, schools in California have fully incorporated inclusive textbooks that talk about the history and timeline of the LGBTQ community. Schools in Sacramento have even included classes dedicated to these studies. The Gay Straight Alliances, or GSA, can be found in many high schools and even middle schools throughout America. They're basically little safe havens for people in the LGBTQ community and their heterosexual friends who can basically have a safe place to just be themselves and talk about the problems and issues that may face them. Studies have shown that schools with these programs have less delinquency and they have better health than those without. This includes these kids getting in trouble less, they're less likely to be smoking and drinking and going out and partying. There's a lower suicide attempt rate, they're having fewer casual sex partners, there's lower rates of homophobic remarks, harassment, and even destroying of belongings in the school place. Fortunately, there's also been a lot of school enforcement on LGBTQ rights. As of 2016, There were at least 20 states that have laws that prohibit bullying of students based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. These states, and a lot others, have also added laws that protect teachers from workplace discrimination despite their sexual orientation or gender identity. Some of these states include California, Colorado, Massachusetts, and Oregon. According to the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, these are some of the laws regarding the LGBTQ community in the school. There are policies that are protecting the LGBTQ students from harassment, violence, and discrimination. There's staff training on violence and suicide prevention related to these students. They also offer school-based groups for LGBTQ students and their heterosexual allies called GSA. There's also curriculum that encourages respect for the human rights of everyone, including those of the LGBTQ community. Although some states have policies to protect the rights of the LGBTQ students, there's still many states that lack this protection and even have laws to restrict teachers from talking about issues facing the LGBTQ community. This definitely means that there's still discrimination from both schools and teachers against this community. Students don't always have access to the information that they need about the issues that they may face. They don't have access to safe sex information, and they don't have access to information about health risks, suicide prevention, or even general questions about questioning your sexuality or gender identity. Because of these laws that restrict teachers from talking about these issues, kids don't know what they're going to be going through because they aren't allowed to talk about it. And peers aren't the only source of bullying for these students. Teachers and other staff have been found mocking students or joining in the laughter. In South Dakota, a young girl with a gay father was getting harassed by her peers at school with homophobic slurs. The girl saw her teacher was laughing along with the students, and she definitely said that it made the harassment feel more intense. So definitely a lot of discrimination comes from the schools and the students. I'm going to first talk about the discrimination that comes from the schools. It happens a lot with restricting bathroom access or restricting locker room access. So basically, if someone is male assigned at birth and they are a transgender female, they are not allowed to go into the girls' bathroom or the girls' locker room. This also means that they're not able to participate in certain extracurricular activities, such as certain sports, or they may not even be allowed to wear certain clothes to school or events such as prom. Lacking certain resources and even learning materials in libraries or in the counseling offices that are relevant to their experiences makes them feel like they are not included, and it also just gives them a lack of information to learn about the types of people that they are. Another thing that's really prevalent, especially in the teachers and even in other peers, is misgendering and dead naming. This basically means that you call someone by a different pronoun or a name that they do not prefer to use, that they do not go by. It also could be a lot of teachers and even some curriculum can discourage same-sex relationships. There's also a lot of discrimination that comes from the peers around them, and it's definitely a more in-your-face type discrimination. It's the slurs and the name-calling and misgendering and dead naming, but more to be offensive than the ignorance that may come from teachers misgendering or dead naming. It's also asking inappropriate questions regarding to people's gender or their sexuality, and it can even be unwanted groping or touching to check for certain body parts that they think that they may or may not have. Something else that can be seen as discrimination is even outing peers without their consent. So basically telling someone else that that person is part of the LGBT community without their consent. So definitely what I think is that students of all identities deserve equal and inclusive curriculum and a safe environment to learn and achieve in. There are many changes that can be made to promote the safety and inclusivity of our LGBTQ students. Some of these could include having all gender bathrooms, enforcing non-bullying policies and responding with appropriate disciplinary actions, requiring schools to document all reported incidents of bullying, incorporating inclusive sex education that includes safe sex practices for same-sex couples, Libraries having pamphlets on LGBTQ issues and books that are inclusive, both fiction and nonfiction, in the library. Ensuring that teachers are using correct pronouns for students and allowing students to use different names at school than the name that their parents may use for them.